Do you want to give pastels a try, but you are undecided? Why should you give pastels a try? Let me tell you why. Because they are amazing. In this video I'm going to go through as many details as possible about pastels, including the best paper to use, pastels in powder form, stick form and pencil form, and much more.
A pastel is an art medium in the form of a stick or pencil, consisting of powdered pigment and a binder. This can be found as well in pure powder form, called pan pastel. Types of pastels. The most popular one is the stick form.
These sticks can be found in two types.
Hard pastels are made out of the same ingredients as the soft ones, except they contain more binder and less pigment. When a soft pastel stick touches the paper, the pigment grips very smoothly to it. Even by applying a minimum of pressure, it has a very large coverage. The hard pastel stick is the opposite of the soft one. It gives a very scratchy feel in contact with the paper and tends not to cover as much of the texture of the paper, which will require more layers applied and even more pressure. Although it sounds like a disadvantage, we can turn this into an advantage. By not overloading the paper with pigment, we get an asset in combating possible drawing damages. Another way preferred by many artists is the pencil form. They are ideal for creating fine details such as hair, fur or clothing. This can be found in a variety of brands. My favorite and used ones are Caran d'Ache, the white pencil, Stabilo Carbotello, and Faber-Castell Pitt.
Although all these three brands are all pencils, there is a difference between them.
Caran d'Ache pencils are very soft, perfect for adding highlights and finishing touches. Faber-Castell Pitt are much harder, being my favorite when it comes to create fine small details. Stabilo Carbotello are a perfect combination between the two mentioned previously, being neither too soft nor too hard. The latest and newest type is a pure powder form called pan pastel.
Pan pastel is the world's first range of pastel colors that can be mixed like paint. They are a very concentrated soft pastel stored in a pen format. Now that we know what pan pastel are, let's see how can we apply them.
The most recommended and the best way to apply them is using the so-called soft tools. They are made out of a specially formulated micropore sponge, being versatile, reusable, and very easy to clean. If you purchase only the base colors, you can obtain almost every color you want, so you don't have to spend a fortune on a bigger set, as even a single pan pastel is quite pricey. A big advantage of this type of pastel is that because they are entirely made of powder, they are incredibly easy to be mixed. One very important thing I totally recommend is to mix them on a separate plain printing paper sheet first, not directly on the paper you are working on.
What I noticed in the other YouTube videos about pan pastel is that the other creators forget to mention what are the easiest ways to store them. But I won't.
Here are the best two methods. The tower method. This is the cheapest way to store them. Actually, it is totally free as everything is already at hand and you don't need anything extra. Remove the lid, then screw one container over the other one. Repeat this until you reach the desired height. The tray method. This transparent tray is perfect for storing them horizontally. Simply take each pan pastel and place it in one of the slots in the tray.
Now let's talk about the best paper to use. When it comes to paper, many artists have tried all kind of brands, so have I, but the best in my opinion is the Clairefontaine pastel matte paper.
Pastel matte is a premium card surface specially designed for pastel artists. It has a unique velvety surface made of a fine coating of cellulose fibers. It has the ability to grab and hold multiple layers of even the softest pastels. This paper can be bought in pads of 12 sheets in 3 sizes. The small one is 18 by 24 centimeters, the medium one is 24 by 30 centimeters, and the largest one is 30 by 40 centimeters. They are also available as individual sheets of 24 by 32 centimeters, 50 by 70 centimeters, and 70 by 100 centimeters. You can't get any of these sizes in the pad version.
If you ask a pastel artist what is the most frustrating part of working with pastels, many will say that sharpening them is the most annoying thing to do. We all know how fragile the pastels are, and they are very prone to breakage. It all sounds like a disaster, but if there will be no solution, nobody will use pastels anymore. But don't worry, because there are methods that give you a very good result, such as using a manual sharpener, using a utility knife, and a sandpaper pad.
Using a manual sharpener is the easiest and fastest way to sharpen them. All you have to do is insert the pencil into it and twist the handle. At the end, you will have a very sharp tip ready to create details. To avoid the sharpener's blade from blunting too early, use a graphite pencil from time to time. This will clean the blade and keep it sharp longer. The most common method is using an X-Acto knife plus a sandpaper pad. Be very careful when choosing to use this option. When it comes to something very sharp, it's not to be played with. With one hand hold the pencil, and with the other one you gently begin to remove the wood from around the pencil lid. Don't press too hard to avoid breaking or cutting the lid. You can choose how much of the wood to remove, but the more exposed the lid is, the more fragile it becomes. Although sharp, the lid still isn't quite as pointy as we would have liked. This is where the sandpaper pad comes in. This is a special tool for sharpening pencil lids, so in order for it to work, there must be no trace of the pencil wood around it. Holding the pencil very tightly, start carefully rubbing the tip against the sandpaper surface until it reaches the desired sharpness. Tools to blend pastel.
I'm going to cover the main 3 ways I'm using the most.
Using a finger, soft tools, and blending stumps. Blending using your fingers. The most handy and cheapest way is to blend using your own fingers. Before you get down to the job, make sure you don't have oily fingers or you may leave some marks behind. For more precision and control, I mostly use my ring finger as I can manage the pressure more easily. If you want even more pressure, you can press your ring finger using the middle one, and to get more coverage, you can use more than one finger at the same time when blending. When switching to another color, make sure to clean your finger first using a microfiber cloth. Blending using a blending stump. Although many of us often hear that these tools are mainly used when drawing in graphite, they are also suitable when blending pastels. They push the pigment into the paper very well and don't leave much pastel residue behind. For a better result, I recommend using a higher pressure to make sure that the pastel isn't just collecting on the surface of the paper. The blending stumps are as well very easy to clean using the same method as with the fingers, namely a microfiber cloth. Blending using soft tools. Since halfway through this video I showed you how to use these unique tools, I will now demonstrate using a different type of pastel, namely the soft stick one. After applying the pastel, start making circular motions to evenly spread the powder left by the pastel stick. Repeat this movement until you notice that the original color of the paper is no longer visible, which is a sign that the paper's texture has been filled with pastel. For this method too, the microfiber cloth is the most suitable way to clean the sponge, but sometimes it can't be completely cleaned, mainly if you use very dark colors. In this case, keep it like this and utilize it when you need to blend or apply a similar color. Because I couldn't do a pastel tutorial without a demonstration, I drew a toucan bird using pretty much everything I discussed earlier. Personally, I always prefer to start with the background first. For me, if the background is finished, I can focus more on the main subject in the drawing. You can see how, when the background is more and more prominent, it frames the main subject in a way, helping the eye to focus there. I mainly used pen pastel and a bit of soft pastel, blending them with the soft tools. Pen pastel are perfect for wider areas, like the background, as they have a very large coverage. I could have also used only soft pastels and blending them with my fingers, that in case you don't have pen pastel, but I wouldn't recommend using only pencils for this, as they will fade very quickly and take longer. That's why I recommend investing in a set of Rembrandt soft pastels, which are very affordable if you plan to do a lot of backgrounds in the future. Base layers are essential. In this toucan bird drawing, I used a very dark colored paper, intentionally to show you how this works. We all prefer to use toned paper, such as a dark gray or brown, when drawing with pastels to help with the tones. In order for the original color of the paper not to show through, we need to start building up these base layers until it is no longer visible at all. For me, this step also has a very psychological role. I know it sounds strange, but why is that? For example, when all the base layers are finished, the drawing looks half done because you can already see progress. This makes me feel like I've done a lot of progress in a very short time, and that motivates me even more to continue when in reality building them up was very fast, and in fact all I did was to cover up the original color of the paper. When you are busy with this stage, be careful not to add too much pastel. Better bit by bit and with a light pressure, having more control than to get carried away and add a huge amount of pastel all at once with a lot of pressure, leaving no room for the details to follow. Pay attention to the reference photo and use the correct colors for the base layers. This should always be darker so you can add the lighter colors on top. For example, if I am drawing a Labrador and the ear is a light brown, I will start the base layers with a darker brown photo, building from dark to light, adding lighter and lighter colors until I reach the desired result. The eye, being very small, was made very quickly. I started with a black base layer over which I built the highlights. I always leave the strong white highlight that gives a sparkle to the eye at the end. Here you can see the magic of pastels, the fact that we can add such light and vibrant colors over a very dark and dense black. Honestly, I chose this particular subject only to draw this gorgeous, colored beak. This way, you'll also be able to see how easy it is to combine and blend the colors together with pastels. I started by marking where each color will be placed, blending gently with a blending stamp to push that pigment into the paper. It's very important to do this after each application of the base layer to avoid smudging and give the area a smooth look. Since this bird has some specific colors in the beak, I paid close attention to the reference photo and kept adding colors until I achieved the desired result. The more pastel you add, the easier the colors will be to blend. This is because the texture of the paper is covered with more pigment, which can move more easily from one side to the other. When the base layers are ready, it's the turn of the fine details to be added, always leaving this step to the end. Because pastels are so volatile, we can add dark colors over light ones and vice versa, so I don't stress that the details won't show through. The first thing to do before moving on to the details is to make sure the pencil tip is sharp. To do this, you can choose one of the sharpening methods mentioned earlier in this tutorial. I didn't want to turn this into a hyper-realistic drawing, so I added a minimum of detail to create the illusion of depth. In pastel, the smaller the area, the harder it is to create details, as the tip of the pencils fade very quickly. I paid a lot of attention to the direction of the fur to get the most realistic result possible. If everything in this drawing will be random and the feathers go in all the directions, it will be a guaranteed failure, so check the reference photo as often as possible. For the black part of the body, I only used two colors for highlights, a sky blue and sanguine. These two, being used by applying different pressures, created various textures. I always love this step because seeing how easily it is to add details over any color has a satisfying effect for me. This drawing only took me 2 hours, which is incredibly short for a realistic drawing, all due to the properties of the pastels. I have been using color pencils more than 10 years, but a few months ago I gave pastel a try and it was love at the first touch of the pencil on the paper. I felt like I had discovered a totally new world full of new possibilities. As a bonus, here is what I find very satisfying when I finish a drawing, which is removing the masking tape. I love how crisp and perfect those edges remain after everything is taken down. Mistakes every pastel beginner makes, you have to avoid. The first mistake is not starting the artwork with a sketch or guidelines. As in life, you should always have a plan before starting something new. In this case, the plan is to have a sketch or some guidelines. A well-done sketch is essential to avoid a lot of problems later on in the drawing. Mistake number 2 is choosing the wrong paper color. Before starting a drawing, Examine well the subject you will draw and choose a paper with a color similar to the one most present in your reference photo. By doing this, you will be able to use the color of the paper as a base layer in areas with a matching color. Mistake number 3 is pressing too hard on the pencil and breaking it. If you use pastels, even the lightest application on the paper is visible, not needing much pressure as with the color pencils, for example. With time, you will get the reflex to apply a light pressure, but at first it may seem difficult. Mistake number 4 is adding too many layers. All paper types have a limit when it comes to how many layers they can hold. Even if the pastel paper is much more textured than the others, it will crack at some point if you overdo it. Lots of texture in a paper means lots of room for the pigment to be collected. When all the bumps in the paper's texture are filled, the pigment will just stay on the surface, just being moved around. The first sign is when the pastel starts to slip or scratch very hard. Mistake number 5 is not choosing the colors that are going to be used beforehand. If you choose the colors to be used in the drawing beforehand, you will save lots of time and frustrations. Having all the colors at hand is a game changer. I always do this and it helps a lot, especially to make sure I use the same colors as in the reference photo. Mistake number 6 is not using glassine paper to avoid smudging. Pastel is a very dusty medium, making it very easy to transfer everywhere. Although many of us start from one side of the drawing to the other to avoid the contact of the palm with the paper, we don't always get it right, so using a piece of glassine paper as often as possible is essential. Mistake number 7 is not taping down the paper sheet. Always make sure the paper is taped to the surface you are drawing on before you start. The paper I use, Clairefontaine Pastel Matte, tends to curl slightly in the corners, so this step is crucial. Don't ever use normal Scotch tape as it will tear off the paper when removed. Instead, use masking tape. Mistake number 8 is buying cheap pastel paper that doesn't work. Many pastel beginners buy cheap materials at first that don't do the job right, eventually getting frustrated and hating pastels. That's exactly what happened to me. I tried pastel a few years ago and I used very cheap supplies that made me give up to the medium for a long period. A few months ago, I started again and, to make sure this time I give pastels a fair chance, I bought some more expensive supplies, but they were second-hand, so I paid less, but I got the quality. I figured out, if it's not for me, at least I didn't spend a lot of money. Another solution would be to start small, with a set of 24 pencils and a set of 5 Clairefontaine Pastel Matte 24 by 32 cm paper, which can be found on Amazon at a reasonably price. Mistake number 9 is purchasing a big pastel pencil set that has too many colors. If, as a beginner, you buy, for example, a set of 72 Stabilo Carbonatello pastel pencils, you will be overwhelmed by all the colors in the set and won't know what to do with all of them. It's best to start with a smaller set and learn how to mix the colors. This will create less stress and you'll learn a lot about the color wheel. The last mistake is not working in layers. The most common mistakes made by pastel beginners is to rush and jump straight into creating details instead of easily beginning with the base layers and building it up from there. The base layers will reduce the time spent on a drawing a lot, so give yourself plenty of time to build them up correctly, because if they are finished and look in the right way, adding details on top is gonna be a piece of cake.
In this video, I've tried to touch on all the topics about pastels and clarify as many things as possible to help beginners. I really hope you enjoyed it and you've learned a lot from it. So if you don't want to miss any of those, please hit that subscribe button and the bell button as well to be notified every time a video goes live. And I really hope I'm going to see you in the next one as well. Have a nice day. Bye guys!